Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about everything that has to do with femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I am Cherry Lynn, and I am here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
So we're talking about a big one today. This one's really, really, really important. We hear about this all the time. We're talking about when you're offended. So we all can relate to this. I'm sure every woman on this planet has been offended by their man. It's something that can become a bit of a problem. Now, when we're talking about offended, I think it's really important to explain what we mean by that. Mm-hmm. Some people may think that offended means hurt. Others might think offended means annoyed. Why are we talking about being more offended today versus annoyed?
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that, because offended could be annoyed, could be hurt, because there's levels. So I think we're focusing more today on hurt rather than just someone's chewing with their mouth open, kind of offended.
I think the biggest difference between, you said this earlier, between being offended and being annoyed is that when you're offended, sometimes you're upstairs, you're in a positive upstairs frame of mind, as we like to say.
That's a phrase from the book.
And then you're offended and you slide downstairs into, the basement, which we talk about in your books. When you're annoyed, you're already
in the basement.
You get annoyed, yeah.
You're annoyed because you're already in there and everything kind of stinks everywhere around you. And so somebody chews with their mouth open, it just drives you nuts because you're already there.
Generally, the irritable person, really, it's not even just secluded to women. Generally, the irritated woman or anyone is already kind of downstairs. So I think we wanted to talk about when you're upstairs, more specifically, you're living upstairs, but then that offense kind of takes you down, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I think, with women specifically, this can be really challenging, especially for the woman that finds themselves very emotional. There's a lot of women out there that they're wounded, they're offended by something their husband says, or their boyfriend, or their spouse, however you want to say it, something they do or say, and they start crying, or it just really bothers them.
Well, we also have another little thing that men don't have. We have times of the month. And so during that time, we're even extra emotional. And that's something that is a biological thing we have to put up with. And they don't have it.
We tend to be sensitive creatures. And this is tough. Why is this a problem? Why are women struggling with being offended?
Just like you said, we're sensitive. And everything is connected to everything else. That's also the chapter in my book on the brain. If this happens, then that affects this and this and this. Whereas men tend to be just this one thing. It doesn't spread out into all these other areas of their relationship. And we're more sensitive to the relationship and the health of our relationship on a minute-by-minute basis. If our husband comes home and says, "Why did you do this or that?" Well, you can perceive a slight, like, "Why didn't you do this?" And he may be a little bit tired. He may be hungry. He may be grumpy because of something that happened at his work and taking it out on you. And how do you respond to that and not hurt your relationship?
This is something that I have struggled with. My husband and we come from different, he is from a different culture. And so the misunderstandings, especially when we were first married, were very great. We had a lot of misunderstandings, and I found myself constantly offended. And when I say offended, I'm not talking about annoyed. I'm talking about the kind where you are crying or
just doesn't like me, that's all. He's just sick of our old marriage.
Or you have to go, alone in the car somewhere by yourself because you're so upset. And I think, to me, the reason why this is such a problem is because a lot of women just find themselves so unhappy because they're constantly getting their feelings hurt. With men, I think we don't realize it, but men get their feelings hurt in a totally different way. Can you talk a little bit about how men can be offended and what the difference is between them being offended and us being offended?
Well, some of it overlaps, obviously. If your husband says you're fat or you say he's fat, that can be equally offensive. Yeah. Men have a great need to feel competent. If we say something to them that inadvertently, because I'm sure we would never do it on purpose, makes him feel like he's a loser or like he isn't good at something, that really can hurt him. Whereas it might hurt us, but it might not as much, because women are so invested in the relationship. It's not that none of those things are on our list of things we need, but they have such a drive to feel competent and to be our hero. They don't have babies. They have to have another area of their life where they can really feel like that's their strength.
And I think we deal with it very, very differently generally. Not everyone is the same, but I think men have a tendency when they're offended to pull away or shut down. Women oftentimes verbalize a lot of their offense, and they start to kind of overthink things, and they get into the spiral, and then before you know it, the guy is going, what's going on?
Then there's the other kind of woman, which is more like me, where I tend to get real quiet because I'm afraid of it escalating.
Or emotional.
I'll get weepy, or I'll get really quiet and back off because I feel like something's going like this and I don't want it to go any higher. So I just want to stop it. But then it's all inside and it comes out in tears.
Yes.
Or just sadness. And then eventually, of course, like a lot of us, I always have to talk it out, say how I feel.
And that can be confusing for some men too, because they don't want to talk it out and they don't want to solve it. So I think the point of our video today is that we wanted to talk about why we go through these things, what's going on with us as women, and some of the do's and don'ts that we've come up with to help you navigate through these difficult times in your relationship.
Especially if you tend to be an impulsive person, to help to keep that from being worse than it already is.
Yeah, and I think too that these do's and don'ts are for you because you can't control what he is doing. You can't change another person, and no one wants to be changed. So what you can do is you can control yourself. Now, you can't always necessarily control every single emotion you have. You have to be able to practice some of these things, and it's going to take time to get a little bit better at feeling like you have a grasp on how to react to some of these difficult situations. But hopefully this little list that we're going to go through will help you to feel like you understand a little bit about why you're feeling the way you're feeling and some of the things that you can do to help yourself feel a little bit more in control. Okay, so let's start with the don'ts.
Okay, if this fits your personality, do not react negatively too quickly, because sometimes somebody says something and boom.
Don't talk to me, you tightwad!
Like we talk about in Fascinating Womanhood, nobody wins any argument. They're not winnable.
To me, when I heard this one, I thought that means a verbal outburst, for me anyway.
Yes.
Because sometimes when I'm offended, I have a tendency to just, kind of be a little shocked and stunned, just kind of like, have a reaction that's really wrong.
And if you have a problem with it, you can just say to yourself, this time, just this one time, I'm not going to, and I'm going to compare it. Stop. Okay. And then you can also give yourself permission to say, I can react when I've had a little bit of time, to just even 5 minutes to think.
Yeah, I will say the exception to this could be girlishness if you're not too hurt. And we did a video on that and I can attach it. But if you are offended and you have a fun, playful comeback that you think would help diffuse it, go for it. But if you don't have one, it's almost the opposite. Just don't react really quickly unless you have something fun and witty to kind of diffuse the situation.
Don't get into a selfish survival mode, like where you say to yourself, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm worthless, that we often tell ourselves that isn't true. When he does something that hurts you, you absorb it and think you're worthless because of it, because that's not true either.
I think too, when you can take yourself out of that victim mode and think, okay, what's going on with him? So the selfish thing is really valuable, saying, okay, am I being selfish right now? I am. I need to think about what's going on with him. Is he hungry? Did he say that because he's tired? Did he say that to me because he had a rough day? There's so many.
Did he mean it? Doesn't mean that if he didn't mean it, it's okay. It's not okay. You're trying to preserve the relationship and your own self-esteem. You're trying to do all of it. And this is somebody you know. This isn't a stranger. This is somebody you know. And if this is a habit, you might think, what happened? to him. If you didn't actually, if you're just minding your own business and he comes and says something that really hurts you, like, why didn't you do this? That's hurtful. What's going on with him?
I think there's a list of, I can think of at least a dozen things I think of when my husband says something to me that I am offended by. And tired and hungry are two of them. It's like, is he tired? Is he hungry? Another one is, I wonder how his day was. And I tend to say to him, if he hurts my feelings in some way, I tend to respond generally with, has your day been okay today? What's been going on with work today? Like, I'll just start asking him questions, because it helps me to not feel like, oh my goodness, that was so hurtful. Now I'm hurt. And now I feel like this, it helps you to get into another mindset.
But there's another situation that can happen, because and I know it happens to me. I may be offended by something Bob says because I'm already in the downstairs. He says something that he doesn't mean to be offensive at all, and I took it the wrong way because I'm already really worried or tired or stressed about something. So he'll say something, and I'll think that's really unkind, when actually he didn't mean that at all. I totally misjudged him. It can be our own fault, our own perception of something where no offense was meant at all.
Don't argue.
Don't argue. I know it is so hard to. No one wins. When you find yourself arguing, thinking, no one's going to win this.
It seems to me you're just sick of me. You just don't like our whole marriage, Lorenzo Vega.
Well, maybe I don't, Susie Vega.
What should I do now? No one will win it.
Don't engage in any of that. If you can really practice this, it's so helpful. You never regret not arguing. You never say, I should have argued with him about that. I mean, argue.
This isn't high school debating, Tim. We are debating. And with a debate, you have somebody who's judging it and says who won the debate. If it's just the two of you, there's no one to win. No, there's no referee, so there's no winners, just both losers.
And especially with arguments that result in name calling and just saying things you don't mean.
Don't ever call somebody a name.
It goes into this deep, dark place that you didn't need to go. And the offense probably could have been solved or approached differently in a way that wouldn't include all of that if you had just stopped and said, I'm not engaging. I'm not engaging in the argument.
And don't raise your voice. There's no need to.
I will not.
Nobody hears you better if you raise your voice. And it's really, for most people, a habit. Habits, happily, you can break them.
This takes so long to practice.
It can.
Practice it forever. It's like it's almost like exercise in your mind because it's hard.
Have you ever tried to have an argument with somebody when you have laryngitis? You can't do it.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It stresses your vocal cords more and makes you even more hoarse.
Well, then people kind of listen to you even more closely. Like, oh, what's she saying?
It's horrible.
Yeah, don't raise your voice. That's a really important one.
Oh, yeah, and name calling. I have to say, in the last, 20 years out in society, I can't believe the name calling. My mother used to always say, don't ever call people names. And then the media, I'm hearing people call all these names, and I think, well, didn't their mothers ever teach them not to call people names? My mom taught me that was rude, to call people names. Are we getting into bad habits because of what's going on out there? We don't need to.
Right. We don't need to be influenced by, pop culture and the movies and all the things that they portray as in movies. Relationships, the way they're portrayed often is just so unhealthy and
well, and they don't promote long-lasting loving relationships either.
Yeah, they don't promote good relationships, and that's what we're seeing, and we fall into those habits, and we can absolutely change that. The last one is don't act like a child, which has a lot to do with what you were just saying, calling them names, too much crying. I think some women can use emotions in a manipulative way and not really realize it. Don't play games.
Play games equals manipulation. If crying drives him crazy and you do it to get him to cave in or do something you want, that's not healthy. It doesn't help your marriage. And ultimately, all of us want to have the man that we love, and we love him, and have this lifelong romantic marriage where you dream of dying while you're holding hands.
I think too, don't keep score.
Oh, I'm going to get even with him if it's the last thing I do.
Right.
If you're offended just a little bit, and then you kind of let it go, and then you're offended a few days later, and you're keeping score of that. To me, that's very childish, and it's something that we can do as women subconsciously. We're not really aware that we're doing it all the time. Some women are aware that they're doing it, which is not great, but try to think about the score system as like, I'm not going to do that anymore, because that doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't put you in an upstairs frame of mind, and it makes him feel like you're playing games.
Which he's probably right. The more fun part of this is the do's.
Now the do's.
Than the don'ts. Think about, this is what I do all the time. If my husband has said something that has hurt my feelings, which, you know, we have a real mature relationship, so if it ever happens, it's always repaired very quickly. I always think about how crazy I am about him. And it's such a habit now that I do it instantly. I look at him and I think, I actually got to marry that guy.
One is about taking a trip down memory lane. And we've said this as a tip in several other videos for several other things. And takes practice. I know you say you do it all the time. It's easy for you. It's not easy for everyone to get into that frame of.
I was fortunate to grow up with Fascinating Womanhood, but that my mother didn't teach me. I did that myself because I was really grateful to have gotten it. I always knew I got such a prize, and I always believed it. And so even when I was 19 when I got married. So even when I was at my youngest and most immature, I still would think about how much I loved him. Also, this is the second one here, the do's, is something that takes a little bit more practice, but try to learn to identify what your real feelings are. Sometimes that can be a challenge. Are you really upset with him? Or are you worried about money? Are you worried about politics? Are you worried about something else? And it's bleeding over into that. What's really going on? What's at the core of these downstairs feelings that you're having? And that can help you.
Women tend to be really good at identifying their feelings. It's just true. Being aware of it and saying, wait a minute, am I doing this? Because
look inside. What is going on with me? What is really bothering me? Now, if he's just come home and said he's had an affair, that's
different.
That's going to be it. But if it usually there's something else. I'm worried about this one of our kids who's been up all night and I haven't been sleeping, or I'm worried about them because they don't act like they're feeling well. And then a lot of things bleed over into our relationship, and we can take things out on him.
Do practice regular self-care.
That's hard for some of us. That is hard for some of us. Getting enough sleep, that's hard for me, and I don't even have babies anymore. And just things like taking the time to do something that you really want to do, like style your hair instead of just throwing it up if you really want to.
It depends on where you are in your life. I think, everyone's going to have something different that means a lot to them. I know for me right now, especially with schools being closed, quarantining, I'm never alone. And I am very introverted. And to me, having 5 minutes alone with no noise is self-care, which may be completely different for you in the stage that you're in your life. So
the stage that I'm in my life, because of the responsibility I feel for Fascinating Womanhood. And I have a large family. Taking a little bit of time to read a book that is just interesting, that isn't one that I need for relationships, because I'm interested in history and things like that. Just to take the time, feels like I'm wasting time. Yeah. But it's actually self-care, just taking some time to read. I love reading.
Something that I do that is absolutely like microscopic small. But it's all I can do. When I take my kids to the grocery store, this is going to sound silly. I take them to the grocery store and I'll put them in the car in the groceries, and I'll turn the car on and I'll shut it and lock it. And I'll walk the grocery cart to the stall and put it back. And I'll think to myself, deep breaths, and I'll just say, I'm alone for a second. And I say to myself, this is 30 seconds of me being alone, and I can breathe, and I appreciate that moment. I say, I can do this. Not that I don't want to be with them. That's not what I'm saying. It's more about, I need a second to center myself. And if that's all I can get, that's all I can get. And it helps me to feel like I'm not going to go home and be annoyed because I haven't been alone,
Well, and you'll have more patience with your husband, with everything, but you'll be less offended easily.
Yeah, whatever you need to do for you, be creative. The next one is do walk away.
Either literally or figuratively. You don't have to figuratively walk away if you can't. You can say, I'm not going to engage in this right now. This is not productive. It's not helpful. It's not helping our relationship. Let's not do this now. Just walk away, emotionally or figuratively.
To me, when I hear walk away, for me, what that translates is just distract yourself with something else if you're really offended, because you might need to take that time to reflect and do something else to really see it for what it is. So, sometimes you're offended by something and then you look back later and you're like, oh, why was I so... what that bother me?
And sometimes you actually are like, let's say you're in a relatively new relationship. Let's say you're blending a family. When you're blending a family newly on, haven't been together for 25 years, that kind of a thing. And the other person may say something that really is hurtful or offensive to you. Walking away is just saying, what just happened? Does this fit with his personality? A way to give yourself a little bit of time to not think he can't stand me, which obviously he married you. Taking a little bit of time to make sense of it, because when you lay everything out and think of it, there's another explanation besides magically today he doesn't care about me. It's too extreme. So
this is a big one. I think the walking away is really hard for some women, and if you can just practice some kind of walking away activity that you can do for yourself when you're offended, you're hurt, it can really help you to feel more confident too as a woman and say, I can do this. I can do this. I'm going to walk away.
And just say, I don't have to become totally different overnight. Just one time. Let's see how it feels. Do this. And that's how change happens, is a little bit at a time. As you give yourself time to understand the other person, which bleeds into the next do something for someone else. Serve somebody, him, one of your kids, your friends. Whenever I'm the most stressed out, if I go out of my way for somebody else, nothing to do with me and my needs, it takes a burden off your chest. Even if it didn't solve the problem, it really does.
I think this can be as simple as letting someone go in front of you on the road, or, opening the door for someone, holding the door for someone, allowing someone to go in front of you in line. There's so many things that you can do that are small like that. You could even make it as big as volunteering or baking something for someone. That's a bigger version, but just focusing on someone else and trying to do that, especially if you find yourself, I think this is a big one for the ladies that are constantly feeling like they're offended. Very sensitive ladies constantly feeling this way. And we're not talking about unhealthy relationships. We're not talking about women that are in abusive relationships. We're talking about the women. I had a woman message us the other day saying, I have a tendency to cry all the time when I'm offended. Like, this is a good tip for someone like that.
If possible, if your husband has offended you, do something for him with no strings, and see how that softens your attitude and helps you to forgive easier when you do something for somebody. We are all in need of forgiveness every single day of our lives, so it doesn't hurt for us to practice it ourselves, especially when we know this person, this man, that's specifically what we're talking about here, is basically a good guy. He's just not perfect, and he's going to mess up sometimes, just like we do. And then the last thing, obviously, when you're not just too hurt, use and practice the art of girlishness, because it's fantastic. It's kind of magic when you can understand it and practice this, because it's a true principle.
Yes, I think this has been a really great conversation. I know we could do so much more, but these are just some of our favorite things as far as what to do when you're offended. So thank you so much for going through all of this with us. Ladies, we can definitely do this. And if you have any questions or any stories that you want to share, we would love to hear from you down below. So don't forget to comment and let us know what you think, or share those things with us, share those stories and experiences with us. And we're here every week, so don't forget to check back with us next time. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, you can also drop those down below. We love your suggestions and your questions. And I'll also attach a link in the video for Dixie's book, as well as all the places you can find us on social media.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.